Okay, let's unpack this one. Imagine a question so tricky it kind of makes your common sense spin. A puzzle about truth, lies, skill, and whether doing something wrong on purpose is somehow linked to being better at it than messing up by accident. That's the fascinating, maybe slightly mind-bending territory we're stepping into today.
And we're doing it with, well, one of history's intellectual heavyweights. We're diving into a dialogue from Plato. The text itself is called the Lesser Hippias.
Right, a classic setup. Socrates in conversation with Hippias of Elais. Now, Hippias is quite the character, judging by the sources. He was known as a sophist, someone who didn't just claim to be wise in one thing, but like practically everything.
Yeah, astronomy, geometry, calculation,
Yeah.
you name it. And as the text highlights, he even boasted that he personally made everything he was wearing.
Everything, like his rings and sandals.
Rings, sandals, his cloak. He apparently claimed his tunic's girdle was as fine as the most expensive Persian stuff. He really thought highly of his own skills.
Wow. Okay, so he's presented as incredibly self-assured, absolutely certain of his, well, superiority in all these skills and knowledge.
Exactly. And the dialogue really brings out that contrast between Socrates' persistent probing questions and Hippias's, sweeping, confident claims.
And just a quick historical note here, there's a little bit of intrigue with the text itself, isn't there?
Uh-huh. While Aristotle mentions it, there's been debate, even going back to ancient times, about whether the Lesser Hippias was actually written by Plato.
Or maybe someone else, a student or an imitator?
Possibly. Some scholars feel it might lack some of the, let's say, nuanced subtlety of other dialogues, and Socrates' approach can sometimes feel a bit more direct, maybe. One source called it palpable and unblushing.
Interesting. But for this deep dive, what really matters is the argument inside it, right? The core idea.
Absolutely. Our mission isn't really to settle those ancient authorship debates. It's to wrestle with the central and genuinely provocative idea Socrates draws out here.
Which,
That seemingly paradoxical conclusion. The person who does something wrong intentionally might, in a very specific sense explored in the dialogue,
Yeah.
be considered, well, more capable or even better than the one who does wrong unintentionally.
right, that's the hook. So where does this surprising journey even begin? It starts pretty innocently, doesn't it? Discussing Homer.
Yeah. Homer and his great heroes, Achilles and Odysseus. Hippias had just finished some kind of public talk or exhibition, apparently, about Homer.
Okay. And their friend Eutychus kind of nudges Socrates to ask Hippias about which hero Homer portrays as the better one.
And Hippias, with his usual confidence, declares Homer intended Achilles to be the bravest, Nestor the wisest, and Odysseus, well, the wiliest.
Wiliest. Okay, that's the word Socrates zeroes in on. He asks Hippias straight up, by wiliest, do you mean false?
And surprisingly, maybe, Hippias just agrees.
Yeah.
He describes Odysseus as false and contrasts him with Achilles, who Homer portrays as true and simple.
He quotes Achilles from the Iliad, right? Saying he hates like the gates of death who thinks one thing and says another.
Exactly. And Hippias is quite emphatic. Homer, and he himself, sees the true man as the complete opposite of the false man. Simple as that for him.
Okay, now here's where Socrates starts to, weave his web of questions. He focuses on that idea of the false person. Do the false actually have the power to deceive or not?
Hippias confirms they do,
Mm.
especially when it comes to deceiving others. That's what makes them false, in a way.
And how do they manage this deception? Is it just through, like, ignorance or folly, or is it through cunning and prudence?
It's through cunning and prudence, according to Hippias. They know exactly what they're doing. That's why they succeed in their mischief, their falsehood.
So the false are powerful, prudent, knowledgeable, and wise,
Yeah.
specifically in the areas where they practice falsehood.
Yes, that's what Hippias agrees to. If you're good at being false, you must be smart about it.
So if we follow Hippias' own description here, the false man is powerful and wise precisely in the realm of their falsehood, and the true is supposedly the opposite.
Which then allows Socrates to introduce his first, maybe unexpected twist. Well, if the false are powerful and wise, then it seems they must be counted among the powerful and wise generally.
Okay. And this power to speak falsely, is it something they just can do if they choose to?
Hippias says yes. They have that deliberate power. So the false are those who are wise and have the deliberate power to speak falsely.
Right. And by contrast, someone who lacks that power to intentionally speak falsely, someone who's just ignorant.
They simply cannot be false in that same skilled, deliberate way. They might say something untrue, but not with the same control.
And to illustrate this, Socrates uses analogies, right? pulling from fields where Hippias claims he's the expert, like calculation.
Exactly. He says Hippias, as a skilled arithmetician, you instantly know the true answer to, say, 3 times 700.
And Hippias naturally agrees. He reiterates, I'm the wisest, the most capable, therefore the best in these things.
Of course.
Precisely. Now Socrates asks, could you, Hippias, also speak falsehoods about calculation equally well, if you wanted to? If someone asked for 3 times 700, could you choose to give a consistent, specific, wrong answer?
And Hippias again agrees. Yes, a skilled person like him could deliberately lie about the calculation. He has the knowledge to know what's true and therefore what's not true.
Okay, but what about the person who knows nothing about calculation? Could they consistently tell a specific falsehood?
Well, probably not. They might just accidentally blurt out the correct answer sometimes because they don't even know which answer is the true one they're trying to avoid.
Yeah, their errors would be random. They might stumble into truth by chance.
Whereas the skilled calculator, the wise one, if they chose to lie, could always, consistently, and intentionally give a specific false answer. They have control.
And here's the crucial point Socrates makes from this. Who is best able to speak falsely about calculation when they choose?
The good calculator, the arithmetician.
And who is the true man, the one who can speak truly in calculation?
Also the good calculator.
So Socrates concludes, the same person is capable of speaking both falsely and truly about calculation, the good man, the able man, the arithmetician. In this specific sense, looking at ability, the true man isn't the opposite of the false man.
But the very same person, the one who possesses the relevant skill to its highest degree. That's the implication for calculation.
And then they quickly run through other skilled areas, don't they? Geometry.
Yep. The good geometer is best able to speak truly or falsely about geometric figures.
Astronomy.
Same logic. The good astronomer is best able to speak truly or falsely about celestial movements.
So the pattern holds. In any field requiring skill or knowledge, the person who has the most skill is the one most capable of producing both accurate and inaccurate results intentionally.
Exactly. While the person who lacks skill makes errors or maybe gets things right, mostly due to lack of knowledge or control. It's unintentional.
Okay, so Socrates then brings it back to the starting point.
Yeah.
Homer, Achilles, and Odysseus.
Right. Hippias claimed Achilles was true and simple. Odysseus wily and false.
But Socrates points out instances where Achilles seems to, say one thing and intend another, like telling Odysseus he plans to sail home.
But then telling Ajax he'll actually stay until Hector reaches his own ships. Looks like a contradiction.
Socrates suggests maybe Achilles is actually practicing intentional deception here. The text says something like, practicing upon the simplicity of Odysseus.
Yeah, he flips that possibility. But Hippias strongly resists this. No way, he says.
He insists any apparent falsehood from Achilles must be unintentional. Maybe he was compelled by circumstances, forced into it.
Whereas Odysseus, according to Hippias, speaks falsely and does wrong voluntarily and intentionally. That's the crucial difference for Hippias.
And this is the key moment, isn't it, where the argument pivots? Because Hippias believes that intentional error, voluntary wrongdoing, is morally worse.
Definitely. He even brings up the laws, which often punish those who lie or do evil voluntarily more severely than those who do so involuntarily. That feels like common sense morality.
But this is exactly where Socrates pushes the logic derived from those skill analogies, but now into the realm of doing things well or badly, not just speaking truth or falsehood.
Right. He asks Hippias, think about a physical skill, like running. Which is the better runner?
Is it the one who runs slowly voluntarily? Maybe they can run fast but choose not to?
Or is it the one who runs slowly involuntarily, just because they physically lack the ability to run any faster?
Following the logic about skill and capacity.
Well, the one who runs slowly voluntarily is technically the better runner, aren't they? They possess the ability to run fast, they just aren't using it.
Whereas the involuntary slow runner is simply a bad runner. They lack the skill, the capacity.
So what about wrestling? Who's the better wrestler? The one who falls voluntarily, maybe as a strategic move, letting themselves fall.
Or the one who falls involuntarily just because they were overpowered or lacked the skill to stay up.
Again, the logic points to the one who falls voluntarily as the more skilled, the better wrestler in terms of ability. They have the capacity to wrestle effectively, but choose to perform the action of falling.
And they run through more examples. Physical strength, grace, even things like having an unmusical voice or being lame by choice versus being involuntarily unmusical or lame.
And in each case, the capacity to perform the bad action voluntarily is presented as evidence of a greater underlying skill or excellence in that very area. If you can choose to sing badly, it implies you could sing well.
The argument seems to suggest that true mastery gives you the choice to perform an action well or poorly.
Right. A less skilled person might only be capable of doing it poorly, or might only succeed by accident. Like a skilled archer can choose to hit the bullseye or miss deliberately. A bad archer just misses because they can't aim properly.
Or like a mind with deep knowledge of medicine could use that knowledge to heal, or potentially to harm if they chose to. The knowledge itself grants the capacity for both.
And this leads directly to the comparison of minds or souls. Which soul, Socrates asks, should we say is better in this sense of capacity? The one that errs voluntarily or the one that errs involuntarily?
Ooh. Following the consistent pattern of all those examples?
The logic implies that the soul or mind that voluntarily does wrong or errs is the better mind, purely in terms of its capacity, its skill, its knowledge related to that action.
While the one that errs involuntarily is the worse mind, lacking that control or understanding.
And this is the moment where Hippias, finally seeing where this relentless logic has taken them, just bursts out, right?
Yeah, he exclaims, "Oh, Socrates, it would be a monstrous thing to say that those who do wrong voluntarily are better than those who do wrong involuntarily."
You could feel his moral intuition just screaming against the conclusion. It feels utterly wrong.
But Socrates, he presses the point to its logical extreme based on all the premises they've established together. He asks about justice itself. Is justice a kind of power? Or maybe a kind of knowledge? Or perhaps both?
And Hippias agrees, yeah, it must be at least one of those. Power or knowledge or both.
Okay, so if justice is power,
Then the soul with greater power is more just.
Yeah.
And that soul is better and more capable of doing both good and evil voluntarily.
and if justice is knowledge,
The wiser soul is more just, and that soul is better and more capable of doing both good and evil voluntarily.
and if it's both power and knowledge,
Then the soul with greater power and wisdom is more just, and therefore, again, more capable of both good and evil deliberately.
and to do injustice is, well, by definition, to do something ill or wrong.
So the better and more capable soul, which belongs to what we might call the good man, purely in terms of ability when it does wrong, it does so voluntarily, by choice.
While the bad soul, belonging to the less capable man, when it errs or does wrong, does so involuntarily. It lacks the capacity or understanding to do otherwise, maybe even lacks the ability to consistently do good.
Therefore. And here's the final step. According to this rigorous step-by-step argument, built entirely on the ideas of skill and capacity, the man who voluntarily does wrong and disgraceful things
Would be the good man, in the sense of having the capacity, the ability to do both good and ill by choice.
a truly paradoxical and, as Hippias rightly put it, monstrous outcome. It feels completely upside down.
And it's really important to stress, Socrates himself acknowledges how deeply problematic this conclusion is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He explicitly states he's left all abroad, totally confused and changing his mind. He can't quite accept this logical result, even though he struggles to refute the steps that led there.
He says he's in a crisis of my disorder. This isn't Socrates confidently declaring, see, doing wrong on purpose makes you better.
Not at all. It's him demonstrating where these logical threads pulled from seemingly common sense ideas about skill and intentional action can actually lead, even if the destination is profoundly uncomfortable and clashes with our ethics.
And that's really the power, I think, of this deep dive into the Lesser Hippias. It starts with the simple comparison of Homeric heroes.
And takes us to this really challenging place where the capacity for voluntary wrongdoing seems weirdly linked to having greater skill, knowledge, or ability. It forces us to question our immediate assumptions about what good and bad even mean in different contexts.
It really forces you to untangle our ideas about, say, moral goodness from what the dialogue frames as functional goodness or capability. Right.
Exactly. The argument, if you follow its specific logic, suggests that the ability to do ill intentionally requires a level of mastery, of control, that unintentional error simply lacks.
So this wasn't about Socrates trying to convince Hippias, or us, that voluntary wrongdoing is morally superior. Not at all.
No, it was about showing that if you rigorously follow the logic that connects skill and knowledge to the capacity for intentional action, whether that's speaking truly falsely or doing good bad things, you arrive at a conclusion that dramatically clashes with our most fundamental ethical beliefs.
It's a powerful demonstration of where thinking things through rigorously can sometimes lead, even when it feels like it's turning everything completely upside down.
And for you listening, Exploring these kinds of arguments, even when they land on conclusions that feel really wrong or paradoxical, is actually fundamental to strengthening your own critical thinking.
How so?
Well, it encourages you to dissect ideas, to question your own assumptions, and to see how different definitions and starting points, different premises, can lead to vastly different, sometimes quite unsettling outcomes. It's mental exercise.
So, thinking about this deep dive into Plato's Lesser Hippias, if having the ability and the knowledge is what actually gives you the conscious choice to do ill, while lacking that ability means your errors are basically involuntary. What does that really tell us about the complex relationship between skill, knowledge, and what we call virtue or vice?
Yeah, does the very capacity for intentional wrongdoing imply a certain kind of mastery or control that involuntary error just doesn't have? And what are the implications of that for how we judge actions and maybe even the people who perform them?
Hmm. Definitely something to think about as you navigate the information and the choices you encounter in your own life.